his mother Tara, for example, these are his mother Tara. In very difficult situations, practice their in very difficult situations, practice their diplomatic skills.
The Vibhishan part,
that was very interesting, and I wanted you to
the Vibhishan part.
That was very interesting, and I wanted you to more details because many times we think of Vibhishan more details because many times we think of Vibhishan from one aspect, but you said that there's more to it from one aspect. But you said that there's more to it.
There are two angles from which I have approached Vibhishan. One of angles from which I have approached Vibhishan. One of course the Vibhishan itself between innocence is a person between a commitment between a commitment to dharma on one side and to dharma on one side, and that he's from the fact that he's from he's Ravan's brother and so that's the dilemma. So that's the dilemma. I mean, we always think. I've also tried to when you say Vibhishan. I mean, we always think of what is he. When you say Vibhishan, think of what is he passing. Think of what must have been passing when Vibhishan turns Ram's mind.
So is it ethically or morally right what he did? So and then you bring it to I don't want to be a spoiler and then you bring it how you I don't want to be a spoiler and explain how you bring that. It is interesting how you draw the parallel out there. It is interesting how you draw the parallel out there.
But there's also one is the ethical moral, but there's also there's the question: isn't he being smart? Is Lord Rama? He is actually being smart. Judged him well. He is partly because of Hanuman. Judged him well. Hanuman has given him the inputs. This Hanuman has given him the judgment. This allows him to make a judgment, which actually is not shared by those around. Which actually is not shared by those around him. Whereas he realizes the value of. Whereas he realizes the value of someone like what it means on his side. Someone like this,
and also for the general good of the people. You keep and also for the general saying that it's not you just being moralistic. It's not just in isolation that one sees in isolation from Ramayana. Everything is associated stories from with the good of the everything is associated, and I like how with the good of the people in mind, and I like how you bring the parallels.
Delivery on the ground. Political parlance, I would say delivery on the ground. If you are doing something, that doing something, you are doing something, effective delivery for the population. Effective delivery for the population. Nobler. Tell me what can be delivering nobler, good to than delivering and changing the lives for good to people and changing the lives for the people.
I have to ask you about Bharat Matters. Bharat and India interchangeably, and you come Bharat and India interchangeably, and you come chapter to the title of the book in the very last chapter. Again, like I said, that so usually presumptions that one has while picking up a book presumptions that one has while picking up a book. You overturn many of that in this book, and one is you overturn many of that in this book, and one is that why you tell us only in the last chapter why.
Well, again, I want people to read the other 10 chapters. I want people to read the other 10 chapters before getting there. But there's a very active debate right now. There's a very active debate right now. I think in many ways, I think in many ways, use that debate for their own narrow purposes. Use that debate for their own fact is to me narrow purposes. The term fact is to me certain the term not just a cultural civilization, not just a cultural civilization connotation, but also confidence and identity, confidence and identity, and what terms you and how you perceive yourself and how you perceive yourself, what are the terms you are offering to because that is my business, what are the terms you are offering I don't I don't this is not to me something this is a narrow political something which is a narrow or political. I would even say in that sense a historical cultural I would even say in that sense it is a historical cultural debate and it is a mindset. The point I make is that if we are a point I make is that if we are seriously for the Amrit next 25 years, seriously for the Amrit if we are talking of a Viksit Bharat, if we are talking of a Viksit Bharat,
in 2024 we complete 10 years. In 2024 we complete 10 years being in office. Prime Minister Modi, you've been ambassador, foreign secretary, EAM. You've been ambassador, foreign secretary, EAM. What have been the during this tenure? Where do you see the pivot happen? In where do you see the pivot happen in Indian foreign policy? What were the challenges when you took over what were the challenges when you took over as what are the goals and that were given to you? Goals and that were given to you?
Well, again, I have tried to again bring that out. I have tried to bring that out of what the book. in account of what as a decade of transformation.
But you've not talked about it personally. That's what, it's not a memoir. That's what personally. That's what, it's not a memoir.
I mean, no, it's not. You can't write a memoir when you are still holding a job. You can't write a memoir when you are still holding a job. I've tried to be very objective about it. I've tried to be very objective. I'm a participant, but I'm also in a way I'm a participant, but I'm also trying to deliberately take myself out and look at it. Deliberately take myself out and look at it.
And several prisms going on.
I would say, it was not so much that there was a turning point. I mean, it was not so much that there was a turning point. I mean, 2014 as a turning point. You can call 2014 as a turning point. Modi comes in 2014. Modi comes in 2014. Really weighs the foreign policy, which now really weighs the foreign policy, which now that's essentially the chapter which I described. That's essentially the chapter which I described. Where he feels the need for a new construct. He feels the need one where the neighborhood, very generous, one where the neighborhood non-reciprocal policy towards a neighborhood, non-reciprocal policy towards a neighborhood, which brings to the fact that we have to an extended that we have
the mandalas that you talk about,
an extended zone,
the mandalas that you talk about,
Southeast Asia, the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia, the Gulf, Indian Ocean. Now, we had done Central Asia, made some progress. We had done Southeast Asia, but made some progress. For example, in Southeast Asia, I mean, it was amazing. For example, the region, I mean, it was amazing. Near this is a region. So many Indians living there. So much oil imported. So many Indians living there. So much oil imported. I mean, a country like UAE, for example, had not had a country like UAE, for example, before Modi went there from the time of Indira Gandhi. Before Modi went there from the time of Indira Gandhi. And then you will look at the Indian Ocean. And then you will look at, we were dealing with Indian Ocean. Like, this island, we were dealing with it. I mean, there wasn't this island, that island integrated. I mean, there wasn't a single integrated. Again, in the case of Central Asia, again, in the case of Central Asia, that intensity. Then the ability really to engage. Then the ability really to engage the major powers. Multiple. Engage not in the sense of, oh, keep us out of your problems. Engage not in the sense of, that's keep us out of I don't want to get caught, because that's a kind of like I don't want to get caught. That's not what we are in the big debate. We are saying yes, we have stakes in the big debates of the day. I will take my call, but the big debates of the day. There's no exclusivity in any of my relationships. There's no exclusivity in any of my relationships. I reserve the right to deal with each one of you, and as per my national interest, preparing for a larger, preparing for a larger. Then the entire approach to the diaspora has. Then the entire approach to the diaspora has.
From 2014 onwards, they were suddenly from 2014 onwards. They were suddenly they remained so because initially it seemed they remained so. There were many articles which came up at articles which said there were many articles which came up at articles which said that this is just as soon as Mr. Modi gets grip of the foreign policy, Mr. Modi gets grip of the foreign policy, the diaspora and get on with the leaders. But that's not happened. The diaspora and get on with the leaders. But that's not happened.
Has been the case for the last 10 years. A lot of people has been the case for the last 10 years. Really don't have no idea what is writing about it. Really don't have no idea what
at least nobody knows.
Happening. So maybe by writing this book, I may be doing everybody. So maybe by writing this book, I may be doing everybody saying, okay, here is a logic, saying, okay, here is a logic, here is a narrative. I'm sure those who are open-minded enough to want to learn, who are open-minded enough to want to learn, find some benefit. But the other part is also, if you look at the big global issues, the other part is also, if you look at the big global issues, say for example climate change, that we were perceived as one of the countries holding back. We were perceived as one of the countries holding back. Whether it is International Solar Alliance, whether it is International Solar Alliance, Disaster Resilient Coalition, having been, in fact, Prime Minister Modi in Paris, in Glasgow, with Prime Minister Modi in Paris and Glasgow, we've actually sort of taken the lead when it comes to the COP. Sort of taken the lead when it comes to the COP.
I will read out a couple of quotes from the book. Read out a couple of quotes. In one of them, you say diplomacy is about chemistry and credibility. In one of them, you say diplomacy is about chemistry and credibility. In the and you keep referring to that about how this chemistry, several times about the Prime Minister and world leaders, especially with how it's the Prime Minister and world leaders, how it's delivering on foreign policy. Could you tell me a little bit about how these 10 years have mattered as far as this chemistry and credibility, as far as this chemistry and credibility is concerned?
It's not that difficult to appreciate. It's not that difficult. Let's for a moment not think I mean, let's for a moment not think if two people of the leaders have not met each other, if two people have not spoken to each other, met each other, spent time, have not spoken to each other, how could they possibly relate to each other? How could they possibly relate to each other? And yet, when you have, and we say, okay, when India is growing, when we say, okay, surely if India is growing, our interests are growing, that means surely if India is growing, our interests are growing, that means we need more engaging, and there must be that kind of connect, much more engaging, and there must be that kind of connect. Leaders, at the end of the day, a large part of policy making, a large part derives from the judgment. Policy making, the system derives from the judgment. The system's leader makes, especially the system's leader makes. If now I have not even spoken to you, I have not even spoken. How am I going to influence your judgment? How am I going to influence your judgment? If you see the last decade, if you see the last decade, to me one great advantage, tailwind I've had as foreign secretary, tailwind I've had is the fact that in many countries. Is the fact that in many countries, the fact that the president, the fact they know Prime Minister Modi, admire him, they know Prime Minister Modi, discuss something, admire him, spoken to him, this counts an enormous amount.
And the hugs.
This counts an enormous
Twitter engagement, and the X engagement, Twitter engagement, social media. The Prime Minister embrace social media right away, and then every meeting that he's had with heads of state and every meeting that he's had with heads of state and government, he tweets about it. The heads of government their tweet about it. So the heads of government their tweet about it. A very large role. So this is in this chemistry and credibility business. In this chemistry and credibility business.
I think also yes, it to some extent. I think also. I mean, to some extent. There was that example which was captured by the there was that example which was captured. President Biden is telling Prime Minister Modi, President Biden, whatever you have a 70 something percent, whatever you have approval rate, 70 something percent. How do you do it? Approval rate. So how do you do it? I think other politicians. Like in any politicians, competitive. Like in any competitive, they look to see okay, what does the how is the peer? They look to see okay, what does the how is the peer faring? For them, the fact that for them, the fact Prime Minister is doing well in the Prime Minister could be doing well in election result, doing well 7.7 growth rate, doing well 7.7 growth handling COVID, doing well could be handling COVID, deploying 5G. So they make these judgments, but at the they make these judgments, but at the
kind of rating. If President Biden wanted this kind of rating, he could have got a Namaste Biden for the Republican. Like Namaste Trump got a Namaste Biden. I think like Namaste Trump.
I think that was tied to the quad because we got and we couldn't get a landing zone. And we couldn't get a landing zone.
Explain what is landing zone to explain what is landing zone.
We couldn't get everything agreed. No, meaning we couldn't get everything agreed with everybody. Therefore, it didn't work.
Okay. Another quote which I found interesting was another quote which I will naturally produce a nationalist democracy. Will naturally produce a nationalist democracy. That and you also say that it's something that the world and you also say that it's something that the world will need to have written about. Now this is something that many people those who have seen Indian foreign policy evolve. Those who have seen Indian foreign policy evolve. Kind of a muscular foreign policy now. It's a nationalist foreign policy now. It's a nationalist foreign policy.
Confident, not
your choice. Okay, confident. Some say, like you would say, confident. Some would say it's bombastic. You would say confident. Some would say it's bombastic at times. The domestic policy is so nationalistic. It's reflecting. The domestic policy is so nationalistic. It's reflecting on interactions international that the Prime Minister, that the Foreign Minister, and that everybody else has, that the Foreign Minister, have we made more friends? Have we become a Vishwamitra, or are we imposing our view on the various mandalas that you talked about? Our neighborhood and then our neighborhood and then the East Asia area.
No, I don't think we are imposing. At the end of the day, in foreign relations, beyond a point, you can't beyond a point, unless unless such a big power with such a big power with huge margin of strength, and that you can. That is not the case.
That is not the case.
I would certainly say today that if you look at the 200
odd countries.
If you say where is India
today in their consciousness, in their awareness,
I would say in the last 10 years, we are very much deeper and stronger
in that regard.
If you say
If you
how
say,
many of them feel something has happened in
something
India
has happened
which
in
is
India,
relevant to them?
which is relevant
I would
to them.
again say the answer is
I would
yes.
again
Those
say the
numbers
answer is
have
yes. Those numbers
we are seen
have
as
grown.
more relevant, we are more visible.
Relevant, we are more visible.
We are seen as influencing many more outcomes.
Many more
So,
outcomes.
I mean, if you look at it today,
many
more leaders want to come to India. I mean, one of my big challenges as a foreign minister is really to explain why Prime Minister cannot visit every country in the world every year. Everybody apparently wants.
I'm going to go into the trouble area.
I'm going to go into the trouble area.
When you talked about the
No, this is not a trouble area. This is not a trouble area. High demand. I mean, it's in a way a welcome problem.
You have many wanting to come here.
You have many wanting to come.
Many wanting to come. Many of them who want him to go.
I would certainly say today, look, when we say
Vishwamitra,
just look, I give you the example.
Vishwaguru seems threatening to many.
To me, if you want one example,
it's the G20.
At the G20.
At the G20. Look.
Go back and look at it.
Go back and look at it.
24 hours,
24
not even 12 hours before the G20
12 hours before the G20
declaration was finalized. Publicly predicting that okay, now I know some part of it was politically driven. Put that aside. But the general expectation was relations today are so polarized on the Ukraine issue. If concerns of the global South have become strong and yet being contested in a way or not being recognized duly by others. So there was a north-south divide, there was a east-west polarization, different countries were pulling in different directions. And yet the fact was eventually we got everybody to come to the table. And I accept, they all came to the table, they deserve credit. But finally, the truth is, they came to the table because everybody ultimately had a relationship with India. The other 19 countries said this matters for India. This is something which is right. So let me. The fact is, everybody made a compromise. That's how it happened.
So, but that happened, and then suddenly we saw ties with Canada plummet. It happened. It happened. We didn't. What went wrong there?
That is, I think.
I mean, I honestly do not see. Look, I do not see a correlation. There. Getting everybody around on has nothing to do with the Khalistani issue. The Khalistani issue is not a new issue. The Khalistani issue has existed for decades.
Why do you think that it has become such a thorn in the flesh for India-Canada relations? And why do you think Prime Minister Trudeau, for a handful of Khalistanis, has put relationship with India on the rocks?
I can explain my government, my Prime Minister, and my book.
But you're also an academic, you're also a diplomat.
It's not for me to speculate on other Prime Ministers, but I will tell you the issue at heart. The issue at heart is the fact that in Canadian politics, these Khalistani forces have been given a lot of space and have been allowed to indulge in activities which I think are damaging to the relationship. Clearly, not in India's interest, but I would argue not in Canada's interest. Unfortunately, that is the state of the politics.
How do you see the allegations that Canada makes on India with regard to deaths which have taken place, unexplained deaths which they call, and the investigations they are doing, and compare it with what the Americans and how they are reacting?
I've spoken about this. It is not obviously subject relating to my book. We are not here to do a press conference. So, I mean, I've been quite clear on this, that if somebody gives us something to investigate.
Right. I will move on to, in your book you talk.
Yes, let's stay with the book.
In the book, you talk about legacy building also, and about how everything that has happened in the Modi era has worked towards a goal. In 2024, will India and China bury the hatchet? Because there is in one part you talk about one part you talk about relationship with how France gone forward, you talk about relationship with Japan. These two stand out clearly in the Modi era having upward trajectory. The two which don't take an upward trajectory, one is China, and the other one is of course Pakistan. Pakistan barely makes any mention in your book, but China. So will steps be taken in 2024 to bury the hatchet?
I cannot answer that because obviously, as they say, it takes two hands to clap. But I pose the issue in this manner, that if you look at the last 75 plus years of our foreign policy, we've had a strain of realism about China, and we have had a strain of, I can say, you can call it idealism, romanticism, non-realism. And it begins right from day one. I mean, there is a very sharp difference of opinion how to respond to China between Nehru and Sardar Patel. I'm giving a certain attitude here. So I would say the Modi government has been very much more in conformity with the strain of realism which originated from Sardar Patel.
And you mentioned the romanticism of the Nehruvian era.
Yes.
Now, and then you talk about the realism.
And I've given some examples. I mean, where even when it came, for example, to the UN Security Council seat. Now, again, it's not my case that we should have necessarily taken the seat. That's a different debate. But to say that we should first let China, China's interests should come first. That's a very it's a very peculiar statement to make.
And you also write that there was no reciprocity in the years after that from China.
Yeah, no. So there is a judgment here. There is first a judgment about what we should do, then there is a judgment about what you should expect. So I think today, what will happen with China. I mean, I argue for dealing with China from a basis of realism, that strain of realism which I feel extends all the way from Sardar Patel to Narendra Modi. That is the strain of realism which I feel should allow us to have a certain approach. The alternative strain, which starts from Nehru's in a sense China first policy, because he says first let China take its seat, then we will see for India.
China first.
So from China first policy, it ends up as Chindia policy.
I know people had forgotten that horrible term, Chindia.
Well, I think you should ask the inventor of the term.
Yeah, it's very cringeworthy to read it today.
But there you are.
Yeah. You've been ambassador in China. You've met with several of your predecessors who were foreign ministers. You as a foreign minister, as an external affairs minister, how do you see the pivot that India has taken with regard to China?
No, I don't think, I don't believe it's a pivot we have taken. We have tried to construct a relationship which is based, as I say, on three mutuals. And the fact is that unless there is a mutuality of that mutuality is recognized, this relationship will find it very difficult to progress. And today part of our problem is exactly because in 2020 agreements were disregarded, and the mutuality on which this whole relationship is predicated has not been followed, that we have the situation we have. So when you ask me where would it go, I would say a lot of it would depend on what is the Chinese policy.
In the book you mention a number of places or times in our history where mind games have to be played by diplomats, by politicians when dealing with other countries. With China, did we always lose out on this mind games thing?
No, I don't think we always lost out, but I would argue that at various points of time, we could have, say there was, when we talk about the parts of the past which today would be very difficult for someone to understand, the Panchsheel agreement is another such example. So I would say that today, that's why I come back to Bharat.
Yeah.
That the role of confidence, the role of assurance, the fact, I mean, we are multiple millennia civilization. You know, all this should be in our demeanor, in our standing, and in the way in which we approach other countries.
You confuse people because of this demeanor. Let me be honest with you. You were in Russia and you posted that picture, and then you were sitting with President Putin, and in the Western press there was an absolute meltdown that now Dr. Jaishankar is there, and then there's this bonhomie between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi, untrustworthy friend and ally. The Western media just doesn't know how to read you.
No, if people can't read me, that means my mind games are working. Okay, but the answer is, honestly, I see no reason that people should take any, what was happening other than at face value, because we have always maintained that the Russia relationship is a very important one, very steady one. I have written about it in my book, and I said it in Moscow. I mean, I said it publicly in Moscow even before my meeting with President Putin happened, which is that we value this relationship. It's a relationship that has served India well. Look, I am looking at it now from an Indian perspective. And that is also part of being Bharat. Part of being Bharat is you must look from perspective of your interest, not allow other people to decide your judgment and your responses.
You know, when you write about the Quad and then the disappointment when the Quad had to take a back seat, and then it comes up again. Well, it comes into focus when Prime Minister Modi comes in. Again, it comes into focus. So obviously, when it's Quad, and then there is Russia. Who are the new friends? Who are the old friends? Is everybody a friend? This Vishwamitra bit, I know you're going to come back to that. Is everybody a friend? How do you choose your friends and allies?
Again, look, a country which has maximum friends and minimum adversaries is obviously one with a smart diplomacy. So, why would a country restrict its friends? Why would it say, I will choose you and not choose you? Unless your interest compelled you to do that. I am today focusing on how do I expand my relationships, how am I more present, how am I more influential. So, for me, the more friends I have, the more forums I am member of, the more places where I can influence, sway outcomes is good for me. Now, it's the others who push you, this is the mind games that others play, that they would say, if you are a democracy, you must do this, this, this. So, if you should ask them, well, if that is so, please look at the mirror and tell me how you were behaving as a democracy. So, everybody, after all, look, it's not like every country has its values and beliefs, but every country has its interests as well, and every country finds a balance. So, when others come and tell you that you have no interest, that you must go by what has been decided elsewhere, that's when you lack that self-confidence to say, excuse me, I think I am going to do something else, because I have looked at it very carefully and my interests have taken me in a certain direction or asked me to take a certain position.
But that's exactly what has been happening post G20 in the foreign media. Almost on a weekly basis, one is seeing articles that this assertive India on the world stage is happening at one level, and at the other level it is at the cost of diplomacy, democracy sliding, or democracy indicators sliding in India.
Yeah, but I've not I've made some references to that democracy narrative. That is also a mind game. That is when
I think
people,
I'm regretting using that word now.
But seriously, just look at it this way. There are people who apparently feel more confident of their support outside India than inside India. They get support from outside India. So, we have this constant barrage. We have had this from 2014, it increased after 2019. I am sure it will become very shrill as we lead up to the summer of 2024, who will constantly come at you and say, you are less of a democracy, you are, they will pick what they believe are flaws or failings that we have. Again, we must have the confidence to judge it. I am not saying we are perfect. I'm not saying we don't have room for improvement. Everybody does. We certainly do. But I would say, please look at their motive and their agenda. They are not agenda-less. They are not motive-less. They are trying to push a certain line because they have a certain interest. So, don't necessarily take what comes in the foreign media at face value. Because when you look at the kind of, shall I say, multiple standards that they practice, I mean, you are talking of the state of democracy in this country. I mean, give me any yardstick of democracy. Are your elections fair? Is your participation growing? Are broader and broader sections involved? Are your institutions working? I mean, I would say I am doing as well as any other democracy. Frankly, I could, if anything, I could be passing judgments on a whole lot of other democracies.
But India doesn't.
We are very dignified people, and we.
That's what I want to know. Why is it that India doesn't have its own, or the Indian government? I'm not talking about just the Modi government, and even the earlier governments. There have been no statements regarding slide of democracy of other countries.
You have a point. You have a point. I think part of it is because we also have a tradition where we do not make very intrusive, judgmental statements about other people's politics. That's been part of our tradition. Maybe with the passage of time, that too may change. Many things in the country are changing.
We were talking about Vishwamitra and the friends, and in the book you mentioned that no country is irrelevant to India. What happened with Pakistan? You did make Pakistan irrelevant to India.
No. I think I would not agree with that.
You haven't been there?
I haven't. Sorry.
You haven't been to Pakistan. You made it irrelevant.
As foreign minister.
As foreign minister.
Well, I think that's partly because of how they reacted, after 2019. But I think the way you're phrasing it is perhaps a bit too strong and doesn't quite capture what is the situation. What Pakistan was trying to do, not now, but over multiple decades, was really to use cross-border terrorism to bring India to the table. Okay? That in essence was its core policy. We have made that irrelevant by not playing that game. Now, it's not a case that we don't will not deal with a neighbor. After all, at the end of the day, a neighbor is a neighbor. But it is that we will not deal on the basis of terms that they set where the practice of terrorism is deemed as legitimate and effective in order to bring you to the table.
Talking about relevance and irrelevance, you do mention our neighbors. You talk about Sri Lanka in the book. And is there a new challenge now that we have in Maldives with the new regime taking a pivot against India towards China?
The new regime has just come in. We had a brief meeting between our leaders, Prime Minister and their President. We have to see where we go on from here, because my takeaway from that meeting was that there was a recognition on both sides of the importance of the relationship. So, we have to wait to see how that recognition plays out.
Right. Coming back to your book, you talk in one of them about the three doctrines, the roads not taken. That I found very interesting. I'm sure that will be just for another book at one point of time. Patel, Masani, and
in fact,
Ambedkar.
Patel on China, Shama Prasad, Dr. Shama Prasad Mukherjee on Pakistan,
yeah.
Dr. Ambedkar on China and America.
Yeah.
Because not many people know how strongly, how much he was disturbed by the manner in which our relationship with the US did not fare well in that period. And finally, Minu Masani, because Minu Masani I referred to in terms of, where sometimes the practice of non-alignment could end up doing, which is, you could lose your bearings. I mean, that's essentially what he's saying.
Yeah.
Now, it's not, I have again tried to be very objective. It's not my case that somebody is wrong and somebody is right. My purpose of writing the chapter was to remind people that look, what you take as a given, that this was the only course which India could have followed, may not be true. That at that time, many years ago, there were very intense debate. After all, these are your three key relationships, China, Pakistan, America. On these three key relationships, there were very major debates and choices were made. And today, after 7.5 decades, it's important we look at those choices, if only to ask ourselves and see whether there is wisdom to be gained from that. And certainly, today when you look at those three choices, I would those three accounts, I would suggest to you that a lot of what they had to say maybe had more merit than people thought at that time.
So, the students of international relations, you give like a teaser in this about the conversations and about Shyama Prasad, and in that like in one of them which you said, as Mukherjee was to state in Parliament, India went to the Security Council on the question of aggression, not on the question of
sovereignty,
of accession. So this was a very interesting point. If students of foreign policy want to read about this, those who are studying it, where should one go to read about these conversations and about this? Nehru Memorial Library?
No,
I mean, now Prime Minister Sangrahalaya.
Now you get so much, on the net. I mean, in fact, even in YouTube, a lot of this historical material is played out. I would say it is important for people to revisit. And again, look, I'm genuinely not being partisan about it. You know, I'm not. There would be decisions taken in the 50s and 60s, which would have been very sound, and today we were confronted with the same situation. We may take that.
Were we too trusting in that era? Are we more hard nosed now?
I think I don't know if it is trusting. I've kind of addressed that issue. I think there was an ideological bent of mind, which in fact trusted some and distrusted others. So it wasn't just that you trusted everybody. You know, there were also antipathies vis-a-vis certain powers.
Yeah, correct.
And the US was one of them.
Yes, this is the pivot that I was talking about. The number of pivots that India has taken. Another quote that you, which I picked up was, "Economic crisis ended up being a strategic correction." What, if you could expand on that, and how many times did that happen in the past 10 years when Modi has been Prime Minister?
You see, my recollection is I refer here to how we reached out to the ASEAN, and then how that became a policy beyond that, you know, and today in a way all of that has led to the Indo-Pacific. So if you remember at that time, we had a balance of payments crisis, 91, 92. From that, the decision was made to liberalize the economy, undertake reforms, and look for different, you know, more partners, different partners, and that quest in many ways took us to ASEAN, and the relationship in that 1990s grew very, very strongly. And what it did was it really became then the base to go beyond the ASEAN, you know, to Japan, to Korea, economically to China, to recently much more, particularly after Modi has come to Australia. So my point was the trigger was an economic crisis, but if you see the consequences, it ended up as something much bigger. Now, in the big changes during the Modi period, the last 10 years, I would not say that they were necessarily economic crisis which triggered. For example, he has completely transformed our relationship with the Gulf. You know, if you look today at, you know, the quality of our relationship, the visits we have, the you know, the different facets of the relationship. Now, there was no crisis which was driving it. It was driven because he had a policy, you know, he had a certain understanding of why this region was important, and he took the initiative.
And the strategic correction with Israel also?
No, Israel.
If you were to expand that,
no,
West Asia
I think Israel was a much longer debate in our country. I have referred to it very,
barely actually in the book. Yeah,
because mine is a general description. It's not an in-depth, but Israel was also connected very much with our domestic politics. That there were very conscious judgments which were made, when in early years, that for political reasons in India, we will not really establish a full ambassadorial relationship with Israel, and will keep a distance. And the fact is, after all, ask yourself, from 1948, it was only 2017 that the first Prime Minister's visit from India took place to Israel.
I mean, surely there is a reason, and that reason is a political reason.
Many times it's said that domestic policy has influenced the Modi government's foreign policy. But by reading this book,
influenced every government's foreign policy.
Exactly.
It was not less in the earlier era, including in the Nehru era.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to come to. That can you give us one or two instances where you feel, one you've just told us about, and because you've worked with the Indira Gandhi government, the Rajiv Gandhi government, and subsequently Dr. Manmohan Singh and the others, did you find that this domestic policy influencing foreign policy is something which is a continuous strain, or was it enhanced more during the Modi era?
I would say it's a mix. There are certain interests and certain I would say preferences which you can say come more from a broad national thinking, which are less less susceptible to change. Governments come and governments go, but they don't change that much. But there will be some where they reflect very much the viewpoint of the political regime in power.
And not necessarily the political party, but
it could be the political party, it could be the regime, it could be an individual, it could be a group.
Okay.
I give you examples. To me, the improvement in relations with Israel very clearly reflects the fact that the BJP is in power. I don't think that the changes we have seen in the last 10 years, would have happened if some other party was in power other than the BJP. That's one example. At the same time, I would say the attitude we took towards China in the 1950s, the manner in which we supported them on a range of issues, and I've referred to that in Roads Not Taken, and also in the China chapter. It would not have happened had the Congress party not been in power and had Prime Minister Nehru not been the foreign minister and the Prime Minister. I think it was very much his personal proclivity. The same, in a sense, I would say about taking Kashmir to the UN, that it was something very much which was Prime Minister Nehru's personal push, which took that issue to the UN. So again, Pakistan policy in the Roads Not Taken, one of the reasons I've used Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee as a counterfoil is that at that time there was someone like him who was cautioning the government, saying, look, you are entering this Nehru-Liaquat pact where they have no intention of honoring what was happening. It was not something we realized decades later. As you are signing the pact, a minister of the cabinet is telling you, saying, look, don't do this.
And Ambedkar on the Nation First, which you talk about in the book also.
So I would say, I think there is a lot, as I said, there's a lot that is national, but there is a lot that is political.
In the book, you talk, and I'm quoting again, the surge in India's self-confidence, and you talk about aspirational India, refer to this several times. What has been your feedback in the past 10 years of the Modi government? What do people, when you interact, you go to college campuses, you meet with people, you meet with students, I've seen you interacting with the youth. What do they expect of you as a foreign minister?
I think that's a good note to conclude our talk, and I would say that I find today young people really very interested in the world. Okay, having developed that interest, they want they want to talk to people who can explain it to them in not very complicated, not in jargon, not with too many complications. They have, I think, an understandable pride about their country and our and what we are as a people, and they clearly like that to be projected at the world stage. They, I think, respond favorably if they feel that people are trying to push us around and you will not be pushed around. I think they take that well. I don't think it's not their expectation that we will be hyper, but they like the fact if you stand your ground. So to me, actually, in many ways, these interactions, of which I've done a lot in the last 5 years, they have been for me a very interesting sort of motivator, because it's like you're getting, it's like a focus group. You're getting audience response even when you are penning your thoughts, and they in many ways are the people for whom I am writing this book. That I am trying to capture those multiple conversations I've had with different people. A lot of it very spontaneous, very natural. People come up to you on a plane, in an airport, in a public place.
What do they say to you? Sir, aap ye kijiye, sir, aap wo kijiye. Do they do that?
Not quite, but they I mean, depending on the setting, they kind of express support, or they no, and there is some of what you say, which is which humko ye karna chahiye, that there is some of that.
Yeah. So while reading the book, I was trying to get hints, and I'm sure many will ask you this. Are you really going to take the plunge in 2024 and contest the Lok Sabha elections?
That's a pass. I've answered all your other questions. So
thank you so much, sir, for explaining, and success to this book from us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has to be in the shots. Do you think the TMC will give Mahua a ticket? Thank you very much.